maybe I'm thinking he's saying something different than what he's saying. And it's always smaller things like that. I feel like that's the most common. It's like something so little, and by the end of it, we're like, why did we just waste 20 minutes, like arguing about something completely irrelevant? You know what I mean? And I think we've gotten better at seeing that hindsight. Though, like that was a waste of time. That was not productive. We should try to avoid that in the future. So. But I know when we first would have like disputes and stuff, they would just end, and then we would really think about it. But now we kind of look at it now, and we're like, we should stop. What are we doing right now? And we kind of catch ourselves. So I think tone is a big thing as far as when you're communicating.
In fact, what we call that is nonverbal communication. It could be your face, it could be the tone of your voice, it could be the way you turn your head, or something like that. That you say, I didn't say anything. Oh, yes, you did. You communicated. You didn't say anything, but you communicated, or you roll your eyes, or whatever. But it communicates, right? So it's the nonverbal, many times, that communicates more than what you say, because what you say doesn't necessarily match what they're seeing, what they're feeling or assuming that you're saying, and we react to that. Now, I want to get a little deeper than this. Okay, so why do we react to that?
Because we think that I can speak for me, I guess. You think that what they're saying isn't matching the way they're acting, so you know there's something else there. There's something more that they're not.
Okay, get more basic. Why are you reacting?
Assumptions.
What?
Assumptions.
Okay, assumptions. What?
Defense. Selfishness.
Defense. What? Oh, we're getting close. Selfishness. It's all about me. Keep coming. Biblically, why?
You're going to go in prayer when you're having problems, struggles.
Okay, say it again. Because we're sinners. Okay, so that's why, you see what I'm saying? That's why we become, and what did you say, Olaf?
Well, I said, when you find yourself in a struggle with your wife or your partner, then if you're a Christian couple, then you go into prayer. Ask the Holy Spirit to guide you through the whole thing. Without the Holy Spirit, you are lost.
Now, Olaf is exactly right. But I'm going to tell you, when you get in this situation, like Michael and Sarah are talking about here, and our emotions are very powerful things. Very powerful. Now, God gave us the emotions that we have, but they're very powerful. And if we don't learn to recognize we are now emotional. Now Sarah was saying, okay, we said, why do we? I've talked to couples that have been arguing for days, and I say, okay, what was that arguing about? And they can't even remember why they started arguing. Because, exactly. But the problem is that we end up trying to win, and our relationship loses. So if I ask you the question, who's winning in your conflicts or in your arguments? If you say anybody, then your marriage is losing. So what I'm trying to get you to see is we're different. We see things differently. We evaluate things differently, but that's okay as long as we recognize it. Now, one of the reasons why we struggle desperately, and probably the basic reason, is because we are sinners. And what do sinners do? They sin. And one of the key ways is through pride, or we focus on ourselves. It's all about me and me winning. And it's all about her or him and him. And so we end up throwing these volleys at one another, verbal, emotional volleys at one another, because we want to win. And the way we win, listen to this, is we destroy the other person or put them to, and when we hurt them or destroy them, what happens to our relationship? Okay. It loses. Are you with me here? Now, in America today, and I'm very conservative. I don't know whether you are or not, but hopefully I'm not going to offend anybody by what I'm saying. There's something going on in America today. There is a large group of people that want to change the direction of America. They call it the progressive movement. Some people call them Democrats. Now, I believe that there's something more basic involved than Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal. What is that?
I think it's Satan trying to win more and more people to do what they want.
Can you hear what she's saying? She's saying it's Satan trying to destroy America. Now, why would he want to do that? Okay, it's part of God's plan, but what is, we enjoy freedoms and liberties. Okay, our Constitution is built on the Bible, the Word of God. Would Satan want to get rid of that? Okay, I mean, that started in the Garden of Eden. Did God really say this? Right? So it would be very important to him and his kingdom if he could destroy America and why it was founded, changing history. Have you heard about, we want to change history, we want to wipe out all, what advantage is that? Well, there are 8 billion people in the world. We're less than 1 billion in America. If the greatest nation on earth that's founded on the Word of God could be discredited and destroyed, what's that going to do to the rest of the world? It's going to give Satan a big influence. Are you with me here, what I'm talking about? So, I want to challenge you in an area. The Democrats aren't our enemy, if you're a Republican. Satan is our enemy. Okay, look up Ephesians chapter, I want to look at chapter 6 first. I meant to put it on there and I didn't save it, but look at chapter 6. Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 12. Ephesians 6, verse 12. Who has that could read it for me? Sarah, go ahead.
We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against
Principalities.
But against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places.
All right, now who do you think all of those last phrases are referring to there? Who's the ruler of this world? Theologically, Satan is, okay? And he's the spiritual wickedness in high places. He's the one that's influencing what's going on, I believe, in the world today. Now, this verse is very important because Paul is pointing out here, our battle is not with people. What's a husband and wife relationship? It's made up of 2 people. Our enemy is not our spouse. Just as the enemy is not the liberals or the progressives or those that are trying to take away the America that we grew up in and enjoy so much. They're not our enemy. But we end up battling them and battling our spouses, I believe, because that's what Satan is trying to get us to do.
Well, I think as we live in the world, day in and day out, most of us women are not in the home, we're working. So we're out 8 to 10 hours, and we see it, we hear it, it's in our face, this and that. Then you gotta try to teach your kids. You see it on TV, you see it on the news, and then we bounce things off in the evening, just a few hours that you're together, and then you do it all over again. So it's kind of tough not to
It's not kind of tough, it is very tough. It is really rough. Now, the point that I'm trying to make here, you're in Ephesians 6, 12. This is in the context. What's the verse before that one? What is Paul trying to get you to do? Put on the whole armor of God. He's saying, we are in a spiritual battle. Now, why do we struggle in our marriages? We're sinners. But there's something more important, or not important, but something just as important as that. We have Satan trying to destroy our marriages. Now, we understand why he's trying to destroy America, but why would he want to destroy your marriage and yours and mine? Why would he want to do that? Look at the verse at the top. We're in the same, in fact, if you just look over the next page, it's probably right there in your Bible. Ephesians 5:24. Excuse me, 25. I said 24. 5:24. When Sarah squinted at that, she gave me some nonverbal communication that said, I said something wrong. Was I right, Sarah?
Yeah,
See?
I was looking at it, I said, it says Peter, and then I was like, oh, Ephesians, and I was like, wait,
Oh,
okay. 24.
Who can read that? Or who would read it for me? Okay?
Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it.
All right, now, we quickly read that and say, okay, there's a responsibility for the husbands. You're to love your wives, and there's a lot in that we need to unpack, and I don't have time to do that today. But I want you to not look over the last half of that verse. The relationship between the husband and wife is a picture of what? Christ's relationship to the church. Now, why would that be a problem for Satan? He wants to wipe out anything that would glorify God or anything that would resemble Christ and His church. Is the church under attack today in America? I mean, this whole COVID thing, trying to shut down the churches. You know, we blame our governor for that. And I'm not saying he's totally innocent, but, you know, he has an influence that is behind him that he don't even realize.
On that point right there, minor good news. Thank goodness for who is in the Supreme Court right now, because they just gave California churches a partial positive, which when I read that, I was like,
And that's good. But, you know, the bottom line is, we know the end of the story. And it's going to appear that Satan's going to win before Christ comes back again. And if you look in Scripture, America, the West is not in prophecy. So that means America get out of the way somehow. I'm not trying to preach doom and gloom right now. I'm just saying, you know, if we look at the Bible and we believe the Bible is true, what is happening right now is happening just like the Bible says. And what that tells me is, boy, we need to get back to the Bible. If we're going to have the marriages that God wants us to have, we think we suffer right now in our marriages, it's going to get worse. If we think we suffer right now as Christians, it's going to get worse. And that's why we need to hang on to the Word of God. That's why church is so important. That's why Christian fellowship is so important. Listen real close. That's why it's important that we as husbands and wives work together very closely and understand one another and not allow Satan to destroy the picture of Christ's relationship with the church. Now, let me just show you a couple of scriptures here. I've got them on the screen. In fact, why don't 3 people turn to those scriptures? Well, I don't know. Let's just turn to them, and because I'm not going to read all of them. But I need you to write these down. You need to look at these. I just want to make a couple of points. In 1 Peter chapter 3, wives, this is an excellent passage. The first 6 verses really pertain to a young couple to come to me years ago, and the wife came in, and boy, she told me everything that was wrong with her husband. And what he was doing, what he was not doing. He wouldn't come in with her, so she came in to get counseling. But all she told me about was all of his faults. So I listened to her for a few minutes, and I said, I want you to do something. I want you to go home, and I want you to read 1 Peter 3, 1 through 6. And then I want you to come back and let's talk again. Now, when she went home and read 1 Peter 3, 1 through 6, it says, likewise, ye wives, be in subjection to your own husbands, that if any obey not the word, that's talking about the husband obey not the word, they also may, without the word, be won by the conversation. Now, that's a King James word. What is it? How would we interpret that word today? Conduct or behavior. So, but they might be won by the conduct or behavior of the wives. So, she goes home and she realizes, after reading this passage, she realizes she has a responsibility to Christ, to God, in the relationship to be godly, whether her husband is ever godly or not. And so she started doing that. So I started working with her, and we didn't talk about him anymore. We talked about her. We talked about things that she needed to change in her thinking, in her reaction, in her demeanor, in her relationship at the home. And she started doing those things. Now, both of these individuals were saved. She was every service. She was there Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. He came Sunday mornings only. After about 3 weeks, he calls me up and wants to talk to me. So he comes by the office, and he says he knew that she was coming to see me. And he asked me this question: what have you done to my wife? So I said, I didn't do anything to her. He said, she is not the same wife that she was 3 weeks ago. Now, I didn't do anything to her but show this passage of Scripture. God began to work in her heart, and she began to do what God wanted her to do. Both of them then started coming to me together as a couple, and we worked with them for a number of weeks. As a result of that, he was in construction. He was a superintendent of a project, a number of projects, but he surrendered to go to Bible college. They ended up going into the ministry and the pastorate. The medical doctors had told them they cannot have children. They ended up having 5 children. I think it was 4 boys and a girl. And what I'm telling you is realize you're a sinner and realize there is an enemy that's trying to destroy your marriage, and reset yourself according to the Word of God, and you do what you're supposed to do, whether your spouse ever does or not, and trust God for the results. Now, in this whole situation, he ends it off, this passage off, with verse 7. This is the only verse that he talks to the husbands. He spends 6 verses talking to the wife. I like that. But notice what he says to the husband. Likewise, ye husbands, dwell with them, talking about the wife, according to knowledge, giving honor unto the wife, as unto the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life. Why? That, you see the word that? Whenever the word that is used, it gives us the reason why. Why did you just say that, Paul, or Peter? Why did you just say that? That, is anybody looking at this passage with me? What does it say? If we're not reflecting God's command and husbands loving their wives and wives being submissive to the husband and all those things that we ought to be doing, our prayer life's going to be hindered. If our prayer life is hindered, what does that do to us spiritually? Weakens us. And so, the specific ways that Satan attacks our marriages is he promotes a husband-wife conflict situation. And so he stirs it up. He tempts it. Now, he doesn't do it. He doesn't make us do it. Did he make Eve eat the fruit? But he made it sure appetizing to her. And so, the Bible says that she was deceived. He deceived her. And that's what he is. He's a deceiver. He enticed her. So in 1 Peter 3, 1 through 6, Satan promotes conflict between husband and wife, which withholds encouragement, which promotes selfishness, tempts us not to meet our spouse's needs. Now, when those things happen, it renders us powerless. It really hurts our relationship, but it renders us powerless because it hinders our prayers. Are you following my train of thought here? Now, this is like, you see, before I started talking about this, your mind and your philosophy and your daily modem of behavior with your spouse was kind of like fake news. You know what fake news is? You heard of fake news in the last 4 years? Okay, Sarah just told us some fake news a minute ago. When her and Michael would get into a discussion, she would read some fake news, and the fake news was that, okay, I know what Michael's thinking. Michael would say, yeah, I know what you're thinking. And all of a sudden that thing escalates. That's fake news. Don't base your reaction on what you think. Can you read anybody's mind? Jesus Christ is the only one that can read somebody's, that know him and God. They're the only ones that knows what we're thinking. Okay? Our hearts are deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? We don't even know our own mind, our own heart, you see. So if we're not careful, we're out in the world, we're bombarded by the world, the thinking of the world, and the thinking of the world is very selfish. And all of a sudden, we bring that into our relationship, and Satan promotes that. And it hinders our prayers and hurts our relationship because it promotes conflict. But it also does something else. In 2 Corinthians 2, flip back over there. 2 Corinthians 2, and the first 11 verses, and I'm just going to tell you it because I'm taking too long here. The context here is on notice verse 5. He says, but if any have caused grief, he hath not grieved me, but in part that I may not overcharge you all. Look at verse 7. So that counterwise ye ought rather to, what's the word? Forgive him and comfort him, lest perhaps such a one should be swallowed up with overmuch sorrow. It's in the context of forgiveness. So Satan attacks our marriages, and the reason we struggle is because he promotes unforgiveness. The bottom verse, look at verse 11. Why do we need to forgive? Lest Satan should, what? What's the word? Get the advantage. Get an advantage of us. For we are not ignorant of his devices, or are we? Are we ignorant that he's the one stirring things up sometimes? Remember, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. Our spouse is not the enemy. Hello? Is anybody listening to me? Our spouse is our teammate, and we need to work together. So Satan wants to promote unforgiveness so he can get the advantage in our relationship. And when he gets the advantage of us, he's getting the victory. He's getting the glory. Last passage is 1 Corinthians chapter 7. So 1 Peter 3, he promotes conflict that hinders prayer. 2 Corinthians 2, he encourages unforgiveness to get the advantage. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, let me get there real fast because I want to point out first verses 1 through 5. Verse 1, it says, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own, not somebody else's wife. Okay, so he needs to have his own wife. Notice that's singular, is his own wives. It didn't say that. So lot of stuff there we could unpack. And let every woman have her own husband. Let the husband render unto his wife due benevolence, and likewise the wife unto her husband. You know what it's talking about here? It's talking about our physical, intimate relationship. Okay, and so Paul's dealing with how the sexual relationship is to be reserved for marriage. And so he's putting some guidelines here, and he's saying, now this is the way that honors me. Now, look at verse 5. Well, no, let's read verse 4. It says, the wife hath not power of her own body, but the husband. He says, and likewise, also the husband hath not power of his own body, but the wife. Many times when we are conflicted, many times when there's an unforgiving spirit, it affects our intimate relationship, our sexual relationship. And this is a serious, serious problem. Now, notice in verse 5, it says, defraud ye not one the other, except it be with consent for a time. And he says that, here's the reason for that time, that ye may give yourselves to fasting and to prayer, and come together again, sexual intimacy, that, why? What's the purpose? Come together again. If you don't, what's going to happen? And look at the verse. Tell me what it says. That what? Satan. That Satan tempt you not for your incontinency or for your lack of self-control. Now, there are a lot of wives struggling today because their husbands have gone off and committed adultery, had an affair. And when that happens, it is a real difficult thing to regain trust and get that back. And the husband is at fault for doing it. He did not have self-control. He did not, no doubt that was a serious sin that he committed. He violated not only the trust of his wife, but the commitment he made to God to keep himself only unto her. But I want you to think about something, ladies, just a minute. It's not because he is overly, what's the word that women use sometimes? He is just a sex maniac or something, you know. It's just, that's all it is to him. God created him that way. You know why? So that the human race could be propagated. And there is a desire that's put into the husband to desire his wife physically. There's also, and that's the only way that he can satisfy that desire biblically, is with his wife. If he can't get that satisfied with his wife, unless, now listen real close to this, unless he is a very strong, godly man, very strong, filled with the Spirit of God, he's going to seek someplace else to have that desire satisfied. And that's why there are a lot of men, listen, pastors, missionary men, that are going to the internet and looking at pornography, not because, and we criticize them, they get church and all, but if we don't have our husband-wife relationship right, Satan can get in there and divide us. And if the wife's emotional needs aren't being met, then she withholds the physical from him, and all of a sudden, Satan now is getting the victory, and our marriage is losing. Glory to God is losing. And so, I personally believe that many times, if the wife knew that her husband was having his sexual needs met on the internet or with another woman, she would be very upset. Am I right, women? The only place he can rightly get those sexual needs met is with his wife. And if there's conflict in the marriage, if there's an unforgiving spirit, Satan can get the advantage in our relationships when he tempts us to do those things. Now, I'm just talking to you as a man. Primarily, I'm talking to the women right now, okay? Because we're different. You don't understand the drive that's in the man. Now, men, I want to talk to you for a minute. You don't understand the emotional needs of the woman. You be looking times. Did I just go off? What did I do? Because she's more emotional. When you do that, you're doing the same thing that I just referred to as a wife withholding the sexual intimacy from her husband. You're not meeting her emotional needs, and she has emotional needs that must be met. In that 1 Peter 3:7, it says, husbands, dwell with your wife according to, do you remember the word? Knowledge. Now, husbands, you need to be a learner of your wife. You say, she is crazy. How in the world can she think that way? That does not make sense. Am I right, guys? You're not going to admit it. You're going to You've said it. You've thought it. She is, what planet did she come from? That's one of the differences. Now, you have to be a learner of her. And you have to learn what her needs are, and you have to meet those needs because, listen, as we become selfless And as we seek to glorify God in being Christ-like in our behavior, then we will be the husbands that God wants us to be. We will know our wife in a way that we know what her needs are and will seek to meet those needs. Somebody said, I think it was you yesterday, talking about going to Walmart, husband going to Walmart, you know. Is that an exciting thing for you to go to Walmart? Do you like going to Walmart?
No, it's not.
Okay.
I usually do it weekly, and he doesn't normally go.
Do you like to go to Walmart?
No.
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 Why did you go to Walmart? Because she hounded you?
Because he had time.
Fit in the schedule, I guess.
It fit in the schedule. Did you realize it had such an impact on her?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I bet you'll go to Walmart again.
I haven't been but twice this year, so this past year I went twice.
Why would you choose to do something you don't like? Because it meets the need. It's a loving thing to do. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and went to Walmart for it. No, how did he love the church, Jody? What did he do?
Unconditional.
He died for it. Now that's a step a little further than going to Walmart. Am I making sense here this morning? I'm really encouraging you to realize we struggle in our marriages because we're sinners, but also because we've got an enemy that's seeking to destroy the picture of Christ and His church. And he does it through promoting conflict that hinders our prayers, encouraging unforgiveness that gets an advantage in our life, and he tempts us in our sexual relationships. Any questions or comments? You're awful quiet. All right, so that's my sermon for today. Do we need to take a break for a minute? Anybody need to go to the restroom? Need a break? Okay, we'll keep going if you don't. Take a break. But only take 5 minutes, okay? Let's take a 5-minute break. If you need to fill up your coffee cup, go to the restroom, do it really quick. So that was the question. And that was the question I asked. Did you feel that it described you? Did you feel that it was pretty accurate? See. So, yeah. And if you're honest when you answer the questions, it'll give a good assessment. A lot of times though
I didn't do strongly agree or strongly disagree on anything.
Yeah.
He said that probably messed my marks up a little bit.
Yeah.
On it.
Well, somebody back here said they used undecided 13 times, and then all of a sudden it said beep. You're not supposed to do that. It gave you a warning or something. Yeah. No, you gotta go one way or the other if you can. But that was really. I was kind of doing that to get us till 10 o'clock, and I knew you guys would be here then. So that.
But I try not to leave her any more than I
Sure, absolutely.
Not with him.
Absolutely.
She's got the dog.
All right, so. Sarah, I only had one copy. The personality profile is called SCOPE, and it is a 5-point. Don't be reading the stress thing. Listen to me. We'll talk about the stress thing in just a minute. The personality profile, you need to look at all 5 points. I know the DISC, as I mentioned last night, some of the other personality profiles really take your top 2 areas, and that's how they describe you. But you're really more than just 2 of the areas, and so all 5 of them kind of describes you. The key thing that I wanted to make about the personality profile is this is a positive thing. This is not a negative thing. There's no, this is better, this is worse. This just describes who you are, or who your spouse is. And so this helps you to understand each other a little bit. So really the purpose that I see in using this is it shows in some cases we're different, in some cases we're similar. And so if you look at the little bar graph, you know, if the two bars are fairly close to one another, that's a similarity. But if they're divergent from one another, then that's a difference, and we need to recognize that difference. And when we communicate, when we interact, we need to realize that difference and could result in a conflict. Do you think it's the batteries going off? You want to take this? It's got a red light on it. Does that mean it's... All right, hopefully that'll be better and it won't interrupt us anymore. Now, I really don't intend on talking about the personality profile anymore. I think it's fairly self-explanatory because it relates it to you as individuals. And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about the stress profile that I just handed out to you. There is an exercise. All of you I'm going to email you a PDF of a workbook. It just went out again, I think. Of a couple's workbook. And look at the bottom of that stress profile. Let me see if I have one right here. I do. Look at the very bottom. You should have a bar chart that the stress profile looks something like this. At the very bottom, it says prepare enrich exercises. Do you see that? Okay, so it says identifying most critical issues, and another one is balancing your priorities. In the workbook that I'm going to send you, this is 44 pages. In fact, some of the handouts that I've given you already, you remember when you did the strengths and weaknesses or growth areas? That's a page out of the workbook. All of those pages are in here, but there's some exercises that will help you if you'll sit down and do them. If I can get you communicating, being assertive and being an active listener, if you'll communicate, then you can use these exercises to really help your relationship. So what I'm encouraging you to do is once you get this PDF after we're finished, I'll send it to you this weekend, you can print it out and then use it along with the material, the report, the assessment report that I'm giving you. And so it will point you to where to go in the book. Well, there's a table of contents in the front. I could show you, but I'm not going to take the time to do it. But at any rate, there's a table of contents where you can locate the exercises it's encouraging you to do. Now, with the stress profile, some of you will see a real high stress. Others will see, and your personality sometimes has to do with that. It has to do with responsibilities in your relationship. But a lot of that stress, you contribute to that. You allow it to stress you out. You allow circumstances to stress you out. You have to give permission for someone to offend you. Did you know that? Have you ever said, "You offended me"? You ever said that? You ever thought that? You know, there's an interesting verse in the Bible. Look at Psalm 119, verse 165. Do you believe the Bible is true? Hello?
Yes.
Anybody? I thought I was at a church that believed the Bible was true. Look at Psalm 119, 165. It says, "Great peace." Anybody want great peace? All right. "Great peace have they," so it's possible, you can have great peace. "Great peace have they which do what? What is thy law?" What's the law? The Word of God. "Great peace have they which love thy law." So there's great peace possible to everyone if they love the Word of God, and there's another benefit. And what? Uh-oh. And nothing shall offend them. Now, let me ask you a question. So, Amy, if you're offended, what does that say? What does that verse say about you? And I'm not just picking on Amy. If you're offended with what someone else does, what does that say about you and your relationship at loving the Word of God?
It's not where it's supposed to be.
Thin-skinned.
So all that's doing is giving an indicator, I don't love the Word of God enough. And so that should drive us to say, okay, so what should I be shoring up in my life and strengthening in my life so that when something like this happens, I don't lose it? Make sense? So great peace have they which love thy law, and nothing, it didn't say and most things, it said nothing, that includes no one, shall offend them. So if you're being offended, it's really an indicator that you're not loving the Word of God enough. Okay, so what I want to do, any comments on that? All right, remember Daniel and Maria? Let me see if I can find them here. Daniel and Maria. What do we remember about Daniel and Maria? I just did something. What did I do? What do we remember about Daniel and Maria? Okay, they're a premarital couple. Are they idealistic or are they more realistic? Okay, and that's because they're looking at building a marriage together. That brings peace and harmony and meets each of their needs, right? So they're kind of excited about that and looking forward to that. All right. Since I'm not playing the whole thing, I gotta skip over here, and I need number. Now, they've got some things that stress them out. 6. So we're going to look at the same chart that those of you that got the chart there about the personality profile. We're going to look at the same thing with Daniel and Maria.
Dr. Olson now works with Daniel and Maria as they complete their third core exercise, identifying most critical issues in the couple's workbook.
Most critical issues. There's an exercise in there we're not doing.
Working on stress and resolving stressful issues, a lot of the research shows that
Can you hear it?
that people put a lot of energy into things they can't change or that are low priority. And that if you really focus on just taking one stressor and dealing with it effectively, you're going to be more able to reduce your stress level.
Okay.
So if we picked one of the items.
Okay, now this is important. So I would ask you to take a note, and you can, if you did not take the assessment, then you can do the exercise of, did I hand out the exercise on the stressor? Did I do that? You can do the exercise and evaluate what stresses you out the most. Pick one, pick the top one, or one that you want to work on. Just one. Don't try to work on all 10 of them, if there's 10 of them in there. But just pick one and then try to solve that stressor. So Daniel and Maria, they're going to pick one, and I want you to hear what it is and see how they work through this.
In that cell where you're able to change is high priority, what would be the most pressing issue for you right now you'd like to talk about?
Probably living situation.
Okay. Well, talk a little bit about what the living situation is now with each of you.
I currently own a house.
Okay.
It's in a smaller suburb outside of the city. But
Okay.
it's pretty close to the city.
It's about 20-25 minutes, I guess, from the city. I live
Okay.
pretty close to downtown in an apartment,
Okay.
which I've been living in for 3 years, and I kind of love it because it's really convenient for me to be able to bike to work. I mean, I've walked even sometimes, and
Okay.
I have the buses. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's been really convenient.
And I really love my house.
Okay.
It's a small, it's a 2-bedroom. I actually rent out one of the rooms to my college roommate.
Okay.
Came with me, and she rents out one of the rooms, and it's just a great situation. It has a nice little backyard, and we have a dog, and it's nice to be able to, it's perfect for me.
Okay.
And it's perfect. It's exactly what I'm kind of looking
Okay,
for.
so the issue is what's going to happen now when you get married. Let's just jump ahead.
Well,
you know?
I mean, it's a nice house. Where I'm at now with work, it's just, I have never perceived myself living in the suburbs.
Okay.
It's
Which doesn't make any sense to me. Like, it doesn't, I mean, I just don't see why it makes that much of a difference. I mean, I don't know. I personally think if we have a bigger place to live that I already own, that it makes much more sense to be there than to be downtown. I mean, I don't know. I love downtown, and I love that area, but it's just not, it just doesn't make sense to me.
But yet she hasn't graduated yet. I mean, she still has a little bit left to go on her MBA, so we don't even know, I guess, what your job is going to be or where it's going to be, and most likely it's going to be in the city.
But true. But I mean, no matter what the job ends up being,
Listen to the video.
it's not
don't
going
look
to
at
be
this.
that far away from where I live. I mean, there's really nothing in the city that's that far away from where I am. And your job, I mean, a 20-minute commute is not asking a lot. It's kind of what most normal people do, I would have to say.
So it's obvious you both have pretty strong feelings
putting
about
it-
this.
she's
You
putting it
haven't
on
talked
heavy.
about it very much, it sounds like.
We've kind of, I mean, it's been brought up, but I feel we've kind of avoided it because it's
Yeah.
been easy to do since it was a
Yeah.
ways away, but it's becoming more pressing.
It sounds like it's an issue that we better talk more about, and it'd be good for you to process and try to get some kind of resolution. Does that sound like it?
I think that that's a great idea. I don't know. This is just something that's really hard for me to see the way he's looking at it. It just doesn't
Okay.
make any sense.
Okay. Well, this is actually an ideal kind of conflict for us to bring up a model that we've developed called 10 Steps for Resolving Couple Conflict.
Okay.
And I think what we'll do is kind of shift to that exercise and bring this issue, because this is an issue you're going to have to decide in the next few months. And we'll try to get some resolution. How's that sound to you?
That sounds great.
Okay, so what's the issue? housing. Where are they going to live? Are they very opinionated? It's kind of like being 41 and getting married. And you've lived, you're the one that controlled, decided, and now you're together and you have difference of opinion. So that causes conflict. So we have to have some way to resolve the conflict. We need to realize we're sinners, that Satan is seeking to destroy our relationship. So we've got outside forces that are really pushing in on our ability to be able to work through this. So the handout that I just gave you is called 10 Steps. What is it called? 10 Steps for Resolving Conflict. Now let me just say this. This is not the only way to do it, but it does give you a structured way to work through it. And so I would encourage you to, we'll be looking at this in just a minute, but I'd encourage you to come up with some system, maybe follow this one for a few of the stressful situations, and see if it won't work for you. Let me see if I've got, where do I have Daniel and Maria working through this? Number 7. Okay, so let me go to the next one, and we're going to see how Daniel and Maria work through this. You can follow along.
Let's take a look now at the 10 steps for resolving couple conflict. The first 3 steps are 1, set a time and place for discussion. 2, define the problem and be specific. And step 3, list the ways you each contribute to the problem. In this next segment, Dr. Olson meets with Daniel and Maria, giving us a chance to see step 4, 5, and 6 in practice. Those steps are 4, list past attempts to resolve the issue that were not successful. 5, brainstorm. And 6, discuss and evaluate each of these possible solutions. These are commonly the most difficult steps for couples to complete. Let's take a look.
What have you done in the past to talk about this or to try to deal with this, and what's happened?
Well, we haven't talked about it.
Okay, so you're avoiding it, yeah, which is...
Yeah. It's come up, and we've looked at various places online, but we sort of just, I guess we just argue, and it goes unresolved, and it's like, we'll talk about it later.
Okay.
I mean, at least that's how I remember it.
Yeah, we just have a hard time.
Yeah. One of the nice things about this exercise is that it uses a technique called brainstorming.
Okay.
Where you probably heard of it. It's used in business and in a lot of situations where you just kind of throw out ideas and try to come up with something that's different that you haven't tried before. And you don't judge each other's ideas, but the goal here is to come up with 10 ideas, and they can be silly things.
Okay.
But that might help kind of stimulate an idea or some new approach to dealing with this problem. So just kind of brainstorm with each other and then write the ideas down, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Good.
Ready, set, go. Well,
okay, so we could either move in with you.
right.
Did you notice how
Both of
she
us
jumped
move in,
in
so
there
that's
to
one idea.
control?
Or both move in with me.
Right. So those are 2 ideas,
Yes.
okay?
We could.
I'll take the minutes.
Take the notes.
Yeah.
We could move into a place in the city that's not where you live,
Right, so apartment.
Or a
City.
condo.
or a condo.
Yeah.
Might be nice to buy.
Right, condo. We could move in with your parents.
Move in with
That's
my
good.
parents.
That's good.
That's an option.
Right. We can continue living apart.
That is an option. The three of us with Katie, my roommate,
Right.
the three of us could live together.
Where?
Oh, I guess, is that the same?
Would that be at your
Is that
place?
the same at my,
Is living with Katie at your house different than living without Katie at your house?
I don't know if those are two separate.
Now, did you notice his analytical mind? I mean, he's detail-oriented, so he says, okay, is living with Katie, with or without her, at your house, is that two different things, or is that one? So you can see how different they are in working through this. But here's the important point. All they're doing is brainstorming possibilities. Living with their parents is not a possibility, or is not a realistic option that they're going to consider later, but it is a possibility. And so all they're trying to do is come up with ideas, no matter how bizarre they sound. And so that's what you've got to get out of this. Because even out of the most unusual idea may come the idea that really helps you solve the conflict. So that's the kind of the strategy behind what's happening here. Now watch them.
Ideas.
Yeah.
We could get, okay, there could be a different, we could move to a different house.
We'll get a motorhome. There we go.
Oh, there's an idea.
Yeah. This is good. I mean, you can
Okay.
think of creative ideas.
But honest,
Go ahead.
okay, we could get a different house that's between where you and I live.
Right, so house in between suburbs,
Suburbs,
but house
Closer to downtown.
house
Yeah.
in city. I mean, that's hard to find, but house in city,
Yeah.
which exists. We could find. Okay, we already have that one. I mean, that's 8. We have 2 more spots.
10. We need 10.
we need
Right.
10.
It's tough.
It is tough.
I don't know. I feel like I'm running out of steam. I guess we could, we could sublet a place from my friend Randy, who has like this huge loft that, I don't know.
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't know.
We could do that until we come up with something,
Or something permanent, maybe
Yeah.
sublet.
until we come up with a decision.
Or we could we could sleep on people's couches.
Oh, there's an option. Okay. We've got
We could
10.
be home. Good.
could be-
That's good.
We could be homeless. There we go.
Yeah.
That's the 11th one right there. Homeless. Box on corner.
Walk through these and talk about some of the pros and cons, and either eliminate it or keep it as an option, okay?
Okay.
Now they're on step 6
What was the
on the
first one?
page.
First one was move in with me.
Okay. It's not that I don't like that as an option. I like your place a lot. I just don't see that as a place to settle down and start a family.
Okay.
Okay, we're getting more
But
information
we
now.
could leave it as an option because it's not the worst of the
Yeah.
ones that we came up with.
Okay, so that could be an
You can
Yeah.
circle that. That's one option.
okay. Then there's moving in with you, with or without Katie.
I would think that it would probably be without her.
Without, so you'd kick her out.
Well, I just think probably once we're married, we shouldn't have a roommate.
I guess it's an option.
Okay.
We can get,
Well, if you don't want that to be an option, though, it doesn't have to be an option.
but it's something that exists, I guess. So it's an easier choice than something new.
Okay.
I don't know. There's apartment or condo in the city, which I see is okay because it keeps me close by and potentially you close by if you happen to find a job in the city. But we don't know.
Okay. The only problem with that as the most immediate answer to our problem is that I won't be graduating for a while.
Right.
And so I probably won't have the money to buy an apartment or a condo right off the bat.
Right.
So that might not be,
Okay.
I mean, unless, yeah, I don't
Well,
know.
that's okay. Sublet? No?
No.
Okay. Yeah. And then people's couches, maybe 5 years ago. Homeless? A lot of freedom.
No,
Fresh air?
no.
Okay. No.
So you're down to basically looking at your 2 places.
Or
So
a
is it-
third option that's kind of in between the two.
In
Yeah.
between, yeah. Now,
Okay, now what are they doing now? Okay, they're actually thinking through it non-emotionally. They're actually having kind of fun doing this. Are you with me? So they took something that was a real stressor in their relationship, and they used this exercise to then just kind of come up with, unusual ideas, brainstorming, and now they're discussing each one of the options. As you listen to them, it sounds like they're back at where they started, but listen what happens. They're at least
one thing that we
discussing
didn't differentiate is we could rent closer by, or we can buy. Now, couldn't you could rent your house, you wouldn't have to get rid of it. So you could have that as a source of income for yourself
Watcher.
while you were living somewhere else.
That's very true.
I mean, I don't know how much of that you've thought about, but
I haven't, but that is true.
so
Do you see what happened?
Now, you don't have to make a decision now, but
Oh,
you know what's good is that you two are able to talk in a very rational way about this, and you explored a lot of options, and you narrowed it down.
right.
And what you didn't do is you didn't avoid it. You're talking about it directly. What does that feel like now? You've avoided it for a long time.
Right. We've
How does
stayed
it feel now
fairly
to?
calm.
It feels definitely not as big of a problem as it did when we started.
See?
It feels doable.
Okay.
There were things that I didn't even think about, that I didn't even think of
Right.
as options. I mean, not the ones that really made no sense, like
Yeah.
a motorhome, but like renting out my house didn't even cross my mind before
Yeah.
this. So that was,
We I guess we never sat down to make a list.
Okay.
It's always been floating around in our heads, and just
makes
in
much more
conversation.
sense.
But
And that's what a lot of these exercises do. They make you sit down and do concrete, simple things that anybody can do.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so that's kind of the magic of it.
it's like
Is
being in
that-
elementary school again.
Yeah,
But,
yeah. It simplifies
but it makes it, yeah, it makes it
Yeah.
easier.
right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Good. What you need to learn from this is that you shouldn't avoid conflict, and you can actually sit down and talk through it quite rationally, and I really like the process that you used, and both
Yeah.
of you got involved. I like the fact that you were much more involved in this than you have been in other things.
Right.
So those are all good things.
Yeah.
And those are things to remember to continue to do. Okay.
Sure.
The final steps of the 10 steps for resolving conflict are 7, agree on one solution to try. 8, agree how you will each work toward the solution. 9, set up another meeting to discuss your progress. And 10, reward each other for progress.
Okay, any discussion? What do you think? Becky?
I like the idea. I know 10 possible solutions it could be difficult to come up with, but it really makes you think outside the box. You've got 10, and it doesn't narrow it down so you feel like you only can choose the two things you're having a conflict over, or whatever.
Yeah, and that was kind of the guideline. It forced you to come up with even the most bizarre things, like being homeless. That wasn't an option, even though there was a lot of fresh air to that. But it brought a little humor to it, and it made it a little lighter, and it caused it not to be so overwhelming, and caused them not to avoid it. Melissa?
I also feel like we assume the other person thinks the same thing as we do.
Yeah.
And when you begin talking about it, you realize have ideas different than you do. Like, how you mentioned that. They probably just assumed that, or he probably assumed, yeah, she's thought about everything, she just doesn't know.
know in that last discussion, the roles kind of flipped.
Mhm.
He was doing the suggestion, she was just kind of, you know, they reversed roles.
Mhm.
He was making a lot of the suggestions, she was agreeing.
Mhm.
It seemed like he took more control of the discussion.
And that's one of the things this Dr. Olson is trying to get them to do, is him to be more aggressive in saying what he wants. And if you notice, he is coming out of his shell a little more, and she's being more understanding, more respectful, even though they're not quite where I think they ought to be in that area. They're really handling the communication, and they're respecting each other. And that's important. They're not blaming, they're not putting down, they're not criticizing, they're not emotionally involved in it now as they're working through this process like they were before. I want my way, you want your way, and I'm going to win. If one of us wins in the relationship, if one of us wins in the conflict, what happens to our relationship? It loses. And so that's what we need to remember. Good comments. Anyone else?
It's a compromise. They're all trying to compromise, get a solution to the problem.
Olaf wanted to get that compromise in there, and we got it, didn't we, Olaf? Yeah, it was a compromise. And that's, Tom? Right.
Some people are almost scared to make a decision because it's the final decision. It's really not.
Yep.
I thought it was interesting how that her speech went from being more negative, that doesn't make any sense, that doesn't make any sense, that's not what normal couples do. Then she only used it once that time and said, well, that makes more sense. So, you know, she was starting to get rid of the negativity and be a little bit more positive.
And I believe the reason for that is because it was this big problem to her until she heard something that sounded workable, and all of a sudden it shrank the problem. And now, instead of avoiding it, now they've at least got something to try, an approach. And if they don't like it, they can always come back and work through the process again. Does it sound doable? Now, realize this is wooden, you know, it's not, you know, it's kind of hard to take this, say, okay, now what's the next step? You know, you try to, you know, it's not natural to do it, like driving a standard transmission, you know, is for me now, but you're learning a skill. And when you learn, anybody learn how to roller skate or ride a bicycle? You know, did you fall in the beginning? Did you give up trying to learn it? No, you got up and did it again. And pretty soon you got to the place where the zip, bang, zip, bang, zip, bang became zip, bang, zip, and the zips got longer than the bangs. And then you got to the place where you didn't fall at all. You learned the skill. And so that's what we're trying to do, is teach you skills. All right, anybody else have a comment? So we've really helped Daniel and Maria here. I thought maybe we'd get another couple involved and help you see what it looks like when the idealistic outlook of the couple is a little more negative. In fact, we could even say it was pessimistic. So we have a new couple. This couple is Jen and Bill, and they've been married for a while, and they're characterized as a conflicted couple. So their relationship has deteriorated because they haven't taken care of these conflicts on a regular basis. and they've ignored them for a significant period of time. And so they, as a result of being married for a number of years, they tend to be more pessimistic. They're in the process of rebuilding their marriage, whereas Daniel and Maria were building a marriage. Now, with couples like this, the counselor has his work cut out for him. It's a little more difficult because their teachable spirit is almost non-existent. They have become completely convinced that they are right, their spouse is wrong, and they are not going to give. And so it tends to be a little bumpier. They have a lower level of commitment to one another. One of the great things about Christian couples is usually their faith beliefs are both very high, and so they agree on their faith beliefs, and so their commitment level tends to be greater. And so even though you have a bumpy spot, you know, you're committed to your partner, you're committed to the Lord, you want to glorify God with your life. And so let's find out, let's meet Jen and Bill. Exercise 11.
In this segment, we see Dr. Larson working with a conflicted married couple, Jen and Bill. Dr. Larson teaches them assertiveness and active listening skills.
All right, Bill and Jen, it's great to have you here today. Now, the Prepare Enrich assessment showed...
Now, assertiveness and active listening, now we've gone all the way back to about the middle of last night's session. Remember the wish list? Okay, so this is a different couple, different scenario. Now we're trying to teach them how to actively communicate, actively listen, and be assertive. So watch how this goes.
That communication was one of your growth areas. And so we're going to go kind of the next step here and try and teach you some skills that will help you improve that area of your relationship. So in our workbook here is an exercise called creating a wish list. It's on about the second or third page there. You can find that? Yeah. And we already talked a little bit about assertiveness and active listening, but this is going to help us actually apply these skills. All right? Now, the first step is I want you each to take a couple minutes, just right here in the office, and jot down 3 things you would like to see more of or less of in your relationship. All right? So just take a minute, think that through, and we'll come back and start to share that in a couple minutes. Jen, why don't you...
All right, now let me see if I can... I want to show you something here. Okay, so based on James 1:19, we're going through the wish list exercise. One person expresses what they would like more or less of in their relationship, and the other person listens to, and this is important, not to hear, but to understand, and then to restate, to make sure they understood. So they restate it to the satisfaction of the speaker, not to themselves. Oh, I understand what you're saying. No, you need to repeat back so they say, okay, now you understand. You remember that? All right, so we're getting ready to go through a suggested strategy for conflict resolution, but let's go back to the video.
Go first and share one of your wishes.
Okay. I guess one of the things that I really would like Bill to do more.
Well, talk to him now, not to me. Tell Bill what you're wishing for.
Okay. What I'd really like you to do is I just need more help around the house. I feel like that's something that you is just not on your purview. You don't think about when we're having people over, if it's all on me to clean the house or to pick up after you all the time. I just feel like that's
Bill
gotten
communicating?
to be sort of my job and not both of us thinking about it at the same time. So I think that's one of the things that I really would like is just more help around the house.
Okay. Now, what I didn't hear in there too was how that would feel for you if you got more help. So could you just add a little to that? And Bill, I notice you're not really looking at Jen as she's speaking. This might be hard to hear some of these wishes, but could you actually try and tune into her a little bit visually too? Okay, so go ahead and tell them how that would feel.
Well, it'd feel great because I guess I would feel like you're thinking about our house as our house and not just when it's convenient for you to, think about it. If you're showing it off for friends that you have over and expecting me to pick things up. And I mean, I'm working full time now, so it's just not as easy for me to get to everything. And
Okay, I'm going to stop you there because I don't want you to go too long or it's going to get real hard for Bill to summarize. Why don't you take a shot at tell Jen what you hear her saying.
Watch this.
What I always hear is that you don't think I help around the house, and I do.
Now, I don't want you to, what's hard about being an active listener, sometimes you want to respond to what they've said or defend yourself a little bit, and really that's not what this is about. All I want you to try and do is tell her
you understand what he's
you heard
saying?
her say.
He's
Whether or not you agree, that's another subject.
than-
Just try and tune into what she said and how she feels about it. Go ahead.
You want me to help more around the house and take responsibility for things because you don't feel like I don't know.
Mm-hmm. She said this feeling word there. Do you want to try again and tell him how it would feel for you if he helped and took more responsibility?
I feel like it would it would just make me happier. I would feel less of a burden on me, or I would feel less taken for granted, I guess, because I feel like it's just become my job.
But
okay, now wait, don't respond with a reaction. Tell her what you heard her say it would feel like. Just stick with me. I know this is hard. This is really hard.
I'm supposed to tell her
what you heard her say in terms of how she would feel if you helped more often.
That you would feel, I don't know, less overwhelmed with everything you have to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And did you also? She said too that she would feel happier. That's a feeling word. So I want you to listen for those as you're learning this skill, to not just hear what she's saying, but to hear how it would feel. And we're going to practice this a little bit more, but I want you to.
All right, now, I think feelings are important, but in my opinion, they overemphasize feelings in this material. But I think it is important to express, really you need to do the right thing whether you feel like it or not. Is the point. You just need to obey God, But that's the prophet in me. If I'm not careful, I'll cut people off with the knees and destroy them. But the bottom line is we need to care about one another. And so we go to Walmart because we care about our wife, and we want to make her feel better. And when we make her feel better, she makes me feel better. And it's kind of remember the last time I was here 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we talked about the crazy cycle. And so we feed on one another. And so if the wife respects the husband loves the wife, and then she wants to respect him more, and then the husband loves her more, and then all of a sudden now you are in an energized mode rather than in a destructive mode. It feeds on one another. Did you notice that when she expressed her wish, she was wishing that she'd get more help around the house, and then she said, you. When you're trying to be a good communicator, it's better to use I type of statements. I would like for us to be more whatever or less whatever, rather than you do this or you don't do this. That's an attack type. And that causes people to be on the defensive or on the justifying. And that's what he was doing. And so that's why they got in this crazy communication cycle and nothing happened and they just argued all the time. And after they did this for, 5 years or whatever it was, now it's really bad. And they don't have a lot of respect for each other. Any comment? Let's see what happens when he shares something.
I would turn to be the speaker here next, okay? It's hard, I know, because the tendency is to think about how do I defend myself, or what's my response going to be to this? And what we're really asking you to do is, as the active listener, is set aside that role and just tune in. So it's a little different than maybe what you're used to. Now, as the speaker, why don't you take a turn, Bill, and share with Jen one of the things on your list?
I wish there was less conflict in our marriage. I'd like to be able to come home and not know that I'm going to get into another fight.
And how would that tell Jen, not me, how that would feel?
It sure would make it a lot nicer to come home if I didn't know that I was going to come home and have to deal with another argument and more accusations of how I'm not helping around the house.
Can you tell Bill what you're hearing him say?
Just feel like this is all the same old stuff. Okay. What I hear you saying, Bill, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that you wish there was less conflict when you come home after work. That you think that there's going to be a fight and you want to avoid that.
Did she hear you okay? Yeah. And it's sometimes harder for guys to put a real feeling word to this. What would that feel like for you if there wasn't conflict and you knew there wasn't going to be a fight that night? Would you feel more relaxed? Would you feel more hopeful? What would that be?
I feel great. I mean,
Yeah.
I dread coming home sometimes, and I think that I would feel like I belong there,
Okay. Okay.
You feel like you don't belong at home?
Well, I don't want you to actually ask a question right now. Just tell him what you heard him say would be the emotional experience of that.
Well, I hear that you say you dread coming home.
Now, you've each shared one thing from your wish list. Let's have you share another one. What was the second one?
Well, the second one.
And tell Bill, not me.
I don't know that it's possible because it's not something you can change overnight. But I wish that your goal was that you traveled less with your job, that you were home more, that you were able to give energy to, the kids and I and the house and just family stuff
Okay, not
more
too
than
m-
you do.
Okay, good. Keep it somewhat short because there's a lot for him to try and listen for. Tell her what you heard.
You don't want me to travel as much, but that's what my job is.
Well,
That's-
I understand that, but to stick with what she said. Remember, this isn't about defending it or explaining it. It's just about tuning into what you heard. I know it's hard.
Right. You don't want me to travel so much. You want me to spend more time at home.
Well, not even at home, but just, not out of town so much.
And tell them how that would feel for you.
Well, I would feel like I'm not the only one taking care of things and running the household and taking taking Josh here and there and, helping, I don't know, just not overwhelmed as much, just more support, I guess.
Okay, so not overwhelmed and support.
And supported.
So tell her what you heard. She kind of got to it in the end there.
If I didn't travel so much, you would feel less overwhelmed and more supported.
Good. Did he hear it?
Yeah.
Good. Good. All right. Well, now let's try your last another wish on your list here. What did you have for a second one?
I wish that we had a more physical relationship.
Mm-hmm. And how would that feel if that wish came true? What would that be like?
It's the same as the first one. I'd feel like I wanted to be there.
Mm.
I mean, you don't know what it's like. You don't know what it's like living with you.
I
come.
Well, wait, let's not get off track. Let's stick with the wish, which was for a more intimate or physical relationship. Okay.
I mean, that's pretty basic.
Okay. And what was the feeling you said that would feel like for you?
Like I wanted to be home.
Like you wanted to be home. So home would be
a nice place to be.
A nice place to be. Okay.
Didn't go all the way over, sorry. He thinks that she understands, but she doesn't. And so that's why they need to have the conversation so they understand each other's wishes. And that's why we need to have a civil conversation rather than an emotional conversation. And when they came in there, could you tell they were very emotional? Both of them. I mean, they were emotionally charged, and they've been doing this for a while. So now you can see it's gradually changing. It's not where it needs to be, but they're working on the skill of communicating by expressing, being assertive, and actively listening. That's what he's trying to help them do. Now, this is a very touchy situation for them. Talking about their sexual intimacy. So let's see what she does.
I know this is hard because there's probably part of you that wants to defend yourself or be angry or respond, but just tell them what you heard. I know this is tricky.
Okay, you wish that we had that we were physically intimate more.
And tell them how that would feel. What did he say?
And you would want to be home more.
Yeah. Good. That was hard to just hang with it. There wasn't.
Listen.
Okay.
I'm biting my tongue right now.
What did she say?
What's interesting about this exercise,
biting my tongue right
is
now.
This isn't the place where we solve the problems or come up with the solutions.
What he's saying right now is really important.
It's just about practicing communication and assertiveness and active listening. Now, we're going to talk later about how to actually take some of these things and solve them and come up with some solutions. But this can be very difficult, and I know you guys, it was a little bit of a struggle at times, but you're getting it. I see you both, kind of resisting that temptation to just react, and that's not easy. But to learn to do this is going to start to change the way you communicate at home. All right? So we're going to, in the next session, take and apply these a little bit differently. We'll go that next level and look at how to maybe resolve some of these issues. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right, any comments?
He, at this point, is more open to what's happening than she is.
Because he's hit a,
Body language.
well, yeah, but now they're pushing on a button that affects her. Now, I'm going to give you a little insight here. There's another problem that she has in her crawl. Do you know what her crawl is? A chicken has a crawl. Anyway, she's got another problem that really is affecting all of this. And he caused the problem a year ago or so. And we haven't learned about this yet. So, but it's an unresolved conflict that existed for a long time, and now it's festered, and this is the result. So what we want to do is go to the next session, which is, let me see if I can find it here. We got to get them out of this mess. They are really in a. Okay, I'm going to be giving you a handout that is how to take a timeout. Now, this is not like they take a timeout in elementary school or whatever, okay? But there are times where we need to take a timeout. Is everybody okay if we watch the next video? We need to take a break? Anybody? Okay, so taking a timeout, and I'm going to give you a handout. Don't read it. Listen to the video, and then you can read it later. But taking a timeout is when you personally realize your emotions are heightening. Sarah mentioned this morning that sometimes their discussion escalated. Can I say it that way? When it started escalating, could you feel that happening inside of you? How did you feel it? What happened? Physiologically, what happened in your body?
Oh, I was just, I'm waiting for him to finish so that I can, get the next thing out.
What's your mind doing while you're waiting?
Running, rushing, kind of. It's frustration, I guess.
And thinking of your next response that you're going to say? Okay. You just want to be right. You just want to be, okay. So when you feel that, okay, guys, what happens when you're in that situation? Physiologically, anything? Can you feel your muscles tensing, or can you sense you're getting louder, or you're talking faster? Okay, so when you sense those things are happening, then you should say, whoa, wait a minute. I need to take a break. Not you need to take a break. I need to take a break so I can kind of calm down and get away from the emotion of it. That's the idea of a timeout.
We've learned that. It took us a while.
Okay, so, but here's the problem. A lot of times, there's two problems with it. One is you take a timeout and you never come back. And the second thing is, one of you wants to take a timeout, and while they're walking out of the room to take a timeout, the other one is following them and say, wait a minute, I want to talk about this. And so it keeps going into the other room. I'm not done yet, right? Exactly. So we need to have some kind of mechanism whereby we can say, okay, and maybe that's what you need to do. Just do a big T. You know what that means? Timeout. Okay. So you do a T, and sometimes it kind of puts a little humor in it and breaks it up. Say, okay, you can call a timeout. You know, you got so many timeouts you got in a quarter, so you can call it, you know, you can call a timeout. So you call a timeout, and then you kind of get away. You say, before you take the timeout, you say, okay, let's come back together this evening after dinner, or, you know, tomorrow. You set the time for when you're going to get together and continue the conversation. But you get away long enough for your emotions to calm down, and you just start thinking rationally. All right, so let's see what got them to the place where they needed a timeout. Any questions or comments? I'm going to be giving a handout out, so
Well,
don't look at it, just watch it.
Bill and Jen, there was another area that we identified with the preparedness assessment that was a growth area, and it was the area of financial management. Okay, is that a surprise to either one of you?
Not to me.
Yeah. One of the things I'd like to do as we start to talk about it is start by just kind of sharing a little bit about your results. There were some things you agreed about, and then there were some things you disagreed about. Okay. One of the things that I thought was positive is in the assessment there's an item that read, we usually agree on how to spend our money. And you know, you were both in agreement on that. In other words, you were kind of on the same page. And I thought that was positive. Okay? There was an item that there was disagreement on. And the item talked about being aware of your major debts and whether or not they were a problem for you. And now, Jen, you had some concerns about your debts. And Bill, your response kind of showed that that wasn't much of a concern for you, the debts. Can you guys?
No, I mean, everybody has debts.
How can that not be a concern? I don't get that at all.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get how debt is not a concern for you, especially
Well, I mean, it's a
now
concern. It's just.
Well, but I mean, we have our daughter just started her freshman year of college.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know, we didn't really save a lot of money, but then, I mean, we did have kind of a nest egg going that I thought we were going to put toward college, and you know what he did? I'm sorry, I got to bring it up.
Here it comes.
He bought a motorcycle, $20,000 motorcycle, and didn't even ask me about it at all. Typically we do agree on how to spend the money, but here is this huge purchase that happened under my nose, no discussion about it.
But the only reason it bothers you is because it was something that doesn't involve you directly. Like, in order to spend money.
I don't ride, but it still involved me directly because it's money that we
You're always talking about you want me to spend more time with the family. This is a perfect way for Josh and I to spend more time together, working on the bike.
Okay, see, that's another thing we haven't talked about is that, I mean, you don't even know how I feel about motorcycles. They scare me to death. You never asked me about that. That wasn't something that ever came up.
You're not going to be driving it.
conversation.
I'm going to be driving it.
Okay.
So
I
why
care
does it
about
matter?
you, and so that scares me a little bit, but that never
So just
came
because
up.
you're scared of it, I'm supposed to not do anything with it.
Let me ask you something. I'm watching you two, and I just kind of held back on purpose there for a second because I want to see how you two deal with conflict when it emerges. Is this kind of how it goes when you're at home and an issue comes up like this?
Well, yeah, because she always looks at something as only in how it affects her, and if she doesn't take into account anybody else.
Yeah.
That's so unfair.
Yeah.
That's not true at all. I feel like in this situation, I was thinking about everybody else. I was thinking about Joelle at college, and I was thinking about our consumer debt, and I was thinking about the fact that you didn't even consult me on something
Jen,
like
let
this.
me let me ask you something. How long ago did this motorcycle purchase happen?
Last year.
Last year. Okay. And I'm guessing you guys have argued about this before.
I haven't.
Okay. Well, okay, but there's been some conflict. Okay. How does it usually end up when you're trying to resolve this issue at home? What typically happens? Does it get resolved?
No.
This has not gotten resolved. I am still mad about this because.
Did you get this? Okay, so this issue's been going on for a year. Now, let me just ask the guys, first of all of you, are you starting to take sides in this? How many of you can see her point of view? Let me see. I got a few guys raise their hand. How many of you can see his point of view? All right. Okay, so if we're not careful, we'll start taking sides. But to be quite honest, she's got some pretty good points.
So does he. He needs the reward sometimes.
Yeah, he's got some good points too.
But you have to discuss it if we're spending $20,000.
$20,000 for happy life.
All right, I've just split every couple. But I want you. Have you noticed how they really kind of got into it? Were they really communicating? That's the point that I want to make. What are they? They're actually talking past each other. They're in the mode that Sarah was talking about earlier, and so when their turn came, they're being defensive. They're actually trying to convince the counselor that they're right, and when they really should be communicating with each other. Now, the point of this is not to solve, it is to solve the problem here, but to try to get them to communicate so they can solve the problem. And that's the struggle they're having right now. So let's keep listening for a minute.
Every time I want to talk about it, he just shuts off, and the only thing he says is, "But
it's
I
just that
deserve
I
it."
hate the idea that I have to defend how I spend every penny that I make.
Okay.
You know, I work really hard for my money. I don't question you on every purchase that you make.
I don't make $20,000.
Go, man, go.
You know what I noticed, you guys? Remember how we were practicing the communication skill of saying what you want, or being the speaker and talking about your feelings, and the other one listening. I see two people here, both kind of talking over each other, trying to make their point, and it's kind of like it starts to just escalate. And I'm pretty sure that's not very productive for you as a couple. All right. In fact, I'm very sure of that. You know, I want to teach you some different skills in resolving conflict, but one of the things that's important is when to recognize that now's not the time. In other words, I watched you start to get more and more angry and more defensive as we were talking there. And it occurred to me this issue is going to be tougher to talk about when you're worked up like that. Okay, so we actually have an exercise. Can we put finances on hold for a second and turn in your workbook? There's an exercise called taking a timeout. It's in the conflict resolution section. It says how to take a timeout. It's a couple pages beyond where we were before.
I gave you 2 sheets.
Okay.
One's
and it's
taking
not that
a
I'm
time
putting
out,
you in
the other has to do with
timeout,
forgiveness.
like a bad child or something. This is a little different. This is how do we know we need a timeout because we're likely to just do something damaging or unproductive for our relationship here if we keep having this kind of a conflict. Okay, does that sound like something that might be helpful to you guys?
Yes.
Yeah. Is it something you've ever thought about doing, is taking a timeout?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay.
The problem I see with this is that if he asks for a timeout, that he doesn't ever come back to it. That's my concern.
And
with
that's
this.
not what this is. In fact, that's more of kind of just running away or withdrawing from the conflict, and that's not helpful. That leaves you feeling kind of abandoned, correct? Yeah. So that's not what this is about. Let me talk to you about how this works. There's a 5-step process here, and the goal is to recognize when you're headed down a bad path, and how do we regroup, take a few minutes, take some time, and get back on the right path to resolving something. Okay. So the first step is actually to recognize when are we getting off track? How does it feel, even physically or emotionally for you, when you start to escalate and get worked up? What happens? Jen, could you say a little bit about what might be a way you could recognize that things are not working well for you personally in that conversation?
I lose control, and I feel like all I want to do is cry. And I can't find the right words to
Okay.
communicate, and then I'm sure I get defensive and
Okay.
am not being very nice either.
Okay. So one of your goals is going to be to learn to recognize when that, it's kind of like when that adrenaline is running and when you feel like crying and you start to lose the words, to instead of continuing with the conflict at that point, to recognize, I might need a timeout right now. Okay? How about for you, Bill? What do you feel when things start to get heated?
I just get really frustrated.
Yeah.
And I can just feel my muscles just.
Yeah, I can see you're almost tensing here as you're describing it.
Yeah.
So you physically, it sounds like your body tenses, but emotionally there's a frustration that kicks in.
Right.
Okay. So your goal is going to be to recognize those signs that show you, hey, I'm headed down an unproductive path here.
But I don't feel like I'm headed down the unproductive path. I think.
Well, or to say maybe to realize we are on a bad path here. Okay. I know the tendency is to want to blame right now, but let's just talk about this process. So I want you to be able to tune into yourself and recognize when you're starting to shut down or get too frustrated to have a productive conversation. Okay? All right. Now the next step is to actually request the timeout. And I'll tell you, there's two pieces to this that are important. The first one is that you request it for yourself. Okay, it's not very helpful to say, Bill, you need a timeout. That actually can escalate things even more. Even if you think, internally, that he is the one who's getting out of control. If you get to that point where you recognize this isn't going well for me or us, to say, I would like us to take a timeout right now. I need a timeout. So that's the first step. Call it for yourself, not for your partner. And secondly, the person calling the timeout needs to help agree to when are we going to come back to the table. And this is the difference between what you talked about. It can't just be we're taking a timeout and we're going to blow off this issue and never talk about it again, hopefully.
That's my concern.
Yeah. It's, I need a timeout. Can we take an hour? Or I need a timeout. Can we talk about this tonight after dinner? You set a time for when you're going to resume the conversation. You see how that is very different than just saying, stop, I don't want to talk about this? Yeah. Do you get that?
You don't look like you're very happy about that. Would you agree to that? To set a time that we would come back and talk about it after we cool down?
I have no doubt that we'll continue talking about it.
Oh, okay, so you're willing to come back to the table though, because I heard one of her fears is that you might withdraw and not want to come back to the conversation. So both of you need to be able to agree that okay, we'll take our time out, but we're going to resume. And so let's just try that. Let's hold that for now. Now the third part is kind of the helpful part personally. It's when you do then call your time out and take some distance or time from one another, getting in tune with yourself and saying, how do I calm back down? How can I relax, sort of recenter myself and get myself in a better mindset so we can continue talking about this difficult issue? What are some ways, Bill, that you think you might be able to relax or calm down? If, let's say you had an hour break from a conflict, what would you need to do?
Go right on my.
I knew you were going to say that.
That's okay.
You girls got it.
Motorcycle.
Yeah. I know it's a little bit of irony here, but that's one way you relax.
Exactly.
Okay. Are there other ways too?
I'd rather pay for a therapist for you to relax. It would have cost less than $20,000.
Let's hang with me here, guys. Hang with me. I know, it sounds like that's a great way for you to relax, and yet when she hears the motorcycle fire up in the garage, it might make it even harder for her to relax and calm down.
If this is what we're talking about.
So you're saying that the way I choose to relax has to be amenable to her?
No, it doesn't have to be, but it might be helpful for us to add one or two other things to your list so that you have options.
Listen,
and that's not the only one. I mean, we live in this climate. There'll be times of the year where you can't go for a motorcycle ride. So what are you going to do at that point?
Be raining, snowing.
Go hit a bucket of golf balls.
Yeah. Okay. A bucket of
Hit a
balls.
bucket of golf balls.
Some guys like to even just watch TV for a little while helps them calm down. Or
That would be nice.
okay, okay. Just getting some distance and some quiet, some space would help you. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. How about for you, Jen?
For me, it's some form of exercise. I
Okay.
get to go walk, or I don't really jog, but I go to the gym, and
Okay.
I have to be physical in some way
Okay.
in order to release all that.
Yeah, good, good. That's great. That's great. So now you each are aware, starting to become more aware of when would I need to call a timeout, how would I call it, and what would I start to do to relax and calm down. Now, while you're doing the relax and calm down stage, that's the time to start to think about what would be helpful as I return. How can I get myself in a mindset that would be more productive? And there's a few bullet points here. Under step 4, try and
Look
identify
at 'em.
what you are thinking and
Step
feeling
4.
that became so difficult. So you want to get in tune with how you're really feeling about this issue.
So don't ride the motorcycle.
No, it's all right. It's all right. He can have. He needs his ways too.
I
It's
know.
and then think about how you would actually use those I statements that we talked about in the last exercise. How would you present how you're thinking and feeling about things in a more productive way? Because what you were doing a few minutes ago wasn't that. It wasn't that healthy communication strategy that we talked about. And then another idea that I really like here at the bottom, 2 things. One is try and consider your partner's point of view. And then finally,
That's empathic.
just remind yourself that you're a team. You know, you
Put
guys
yourself in their shoes.
are a married couple. You've got kids that you love. And even though at times it seems like you're setting it up like you're adversaries, you really are a team. And so remind yourself of that and come back to the table with that in mind. How can we resolve this so that we both feel good about it? That's the kind of productive thing we want you to think about as you're taking your time out. Okay? Any thoughts on that? Does that make sense? Okay.
Yep, makes sense.
Good. Yep. The last one, let me just tell you, the last one step is to actually just resume the conversation, this time using some of the skills that you've learned. And that's important because remember, if we don't resume the conversation, then it was just trying to sweep something under the rug. And an old colleague of mine said something that I really liked. He said, you know, anger never gets buried dead, it gets buried alive, and it comes back. So if we don't bury this thing the right way, it's just going to come back. And that's what this
So
is
what's the
about.
difference between taking a time out, like you're talking about,
Yeah.
and I mean, we're constantly taking a time out on this motorcycle thing.
Yeah, but I don't hear you coming back to the table in a real productive way. At least that's even what you modeled for me here. It was the bickering back and forth, the defensiveness, and having a hard time speaking and listening in a productive way. So the difference is now with these new skills, when you come back to the table, hopefully you're going to be able to do it in a way that works better for you. All right? So just review this and think about, you can take some notes on this page, whatever you need to do. But I'd really like you guys to try this even at home if something starts to come up and you recognize that need for a timeout. Okay?
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, any questions or comments? Sarah?
One of the first things they said when we watched the second part, which I think we both totally related to, is like when to have the conversation. Because I feel like most of the time when we have an argument about something, it's like really early in the morning or something, you know, it's just got started for the day, or I'm in the middle of working or something. It's like a high stress moment maybe. And it's like now is not the time to be talking about like, oh, do we want to, you know, purchase it or something. It's early, we're both still waking up, like we're not, it's not a good time. And then, but we started noticing that like maybe we shouldn't talk about stuff like this until a little later in the day, because it's like the first thing you're talking about in the morning. And I'm like, that's what I was like, my answer is always no in the morning, because I'm not awakened up yet to consider, you know what I mean? I'm just not, my mind's not mentally prepared for it. So I feel like that was kind of.
Okay, Sarah's making an excellent point that all of us need to do as individuals. We're different, and even though Michael may want to talk about it now, and now's a good time for Michael to talk about it. It may not be for Sarah. And so Michael needs to respect her because he wants the relationship to win, not just him win. And so I have learned, since my wife's not in here, I'll tell you a story. I have learned, do not bring up any heavy issues with my wife when she is cooking. We will have burned food. So, you know, when one of the partners is in the midst of doing something where they have to concentrate or focus, is probably not a good time to bring it up. Or when you're tired or exhausted or whatever. You know, even though it may be important to you, you want to solve the conflict, you don't want to escalate it. And so you need to know yourself and you need to know your partner. Any comments? You understand what I'm saying? And it may, you're probably different in that area, so you just need to know each other. Now, so he just went straight down that, I don't know if you followed it, but he just went right straight down the bullet points on that. Now, one of the things that's encouraged on there, number 4, and I've emphasized this several times, is you need to try to identify what you were thinking and feeling that became so difficult, and then you need to try to see it from their perspective, from the other one's perspective. So what he needs to do is he needs to see, he needs to try to understand her feelings and why she would be so upset. And what she needs to do is to try to understand and see why he feels that he should be able to do this on his own. And they need to try to see the other one's point of view. And that means you need to get outside of yourself, which you need to empathically evaluate the situation from and that's what I say, you need to get outside of your body, you need to get in their body and try to see it from their point of view. And that's a skill. And you can relate to that. You know, I've never had a baby, so it's hard for me to relate to what labor pains would be. My wife's had 7. I've been there, you know, with her while she had those babies, and I knew they were intense. So it's hard for me to relate completely to it, but I know what severe pain is. I've had sciatic pain down my leg from a disc in my back, and that's severe pain, and it is excruciating. And so you just need to try. There are things that you can do to relate, even though you're different, you can relate and try to see it from their point of view. That's very, very important. Anybody?
Can we go back to the motorcycle? The guy was trying to save his marriage. He took a temporary escape with his motorcycle. Sometimes when the marriage is so intense, sometimes you walk away and the divorce happens.
Okay.
He tried to save that marriage, so he bought a motorcycle. He escaped this conflict, this constant conflict. So he went away. He came back home again. He didn't stay away. So he's trying to save his marriage.
Okay, excellent point that you're making. Let me interject a thought to add to that. He not only escaped, but he avoided. And so when he avoided the conflict, he didn't solve the conflict. The conflict continued. And so, and she reacted to that, and so what happened was he escaped and he won, but his marriage lost. Well, I say his marriage lost. His marriage didn't lose, he didn't get a divorce, but his relationship lost. Well, it's been going on for a year, and if he don't do something about it now, it's probably going to go on longer. She's going to keep that inside. Women have a mind a memory like an elephant. They do not forget. Ask my wife. She remembers, her memory is excellent. Even though I don't think she remembers it right. So you've got an excellent point. He escaped it, but it was just for him. She didn't escape it, and I'm pointing to you. The wife didn't escape it. She still had to deal with it. And so they're a team, remember? And so what we want to do is solve this conflict so it doesn't affect the relationship.
In other words, no split decisions.
Oh, exactly. They really need to work through this. And work through it, listen, together. It's not my way or the highway, kind of thing. All right, now, we want to solve this problem before we quit. What?
Have a suggestion, idea.
Okay.
I think one reason why women remember stuff so well is because we're emotionally attached. As men, you guys remember things when there's a huge something emotionally happens. You know, car accident. I mean, your emotions are all up in the air, even with men. But women, when they feel things deeply, that makes a huge impression upon our memory as well as our emotions, and that's why it's remembered so much more.
And that goes back when it usually is that they are hurt or offended, and I've got a whole message on the grace of God. When you're offended, you lose the grace of God to do the right thing. And you need the grace of God to do the right thing. And so what you've got to do is learn as women and as men to humble yourself in the situation and maybe go against your feelings in order that the marriage or that the relationship can be the best it can be. But that's a good, excellent point.
But that's part of what forgiveness becomes too then.
Okay, we're getting ready to do forgiveness. Yep, forgiveness, yep. You guys really want to get through this, don't you? Okay, so do we want to try to put this thing to rest for Jen? Does he have to sell the motorcycle to solve this issue? What do you think? Well, let's see. Let's see what happens, okay?
We've identified this issue of the motorcycle being purchased and how that seems to have been kind of a turning point for you, Jen. Am I getting that right? That there's something that kind of happened for you inside when that event took place?
Yeah, I felt like it was sort of all of a sudden now we really aren't a team anymore after that. It felt like we were both kind of doing our own thing and making our own decisions and not, like we used to always talk about how to do things together, how things affected the family and I guess it just boiled down to, for me, it wasn't that I would have said no, it was just that I felt like because you didn't bring it to me and say, this is what I want to do, and I feel strongly about it, or I feel like I'm working hard and I'd really like to do this. It was just that the decision was made without any input from me at all. I mean, were you afraid that I would have said no?
No, it wasn't that I was afraid you would say no. I wanted to feel like I had the power to do something. That I didn't have to get.
Now, does he have the power to do
talked
something?
about wanting to be able to do something for yourself.
Can he do something?
You've been giving at home.
I mean, he did, but I mean, would that be sin for him to do something? But what it did is it had an effect on her. And that's going back to the sexual relationship, and I was talking to you ladies. See, do you, can you withdraw sexually from your husband? Sure. Is that a wise thing to do? Well, you see, there's consequences to our decisions. And so we need to think through those. And listen, it's the relationship that we want to win, or not her. It's we. It's a we win. And that's what you've got to look for when you're resolving conflict, is a we win. You win, and I win. We want to come up with a solution where we both win. And that's always possible, but it may require some humility to do that. So, are you kind of into this thing now? Ready to see what happens?
Work and, yeah. Well, you know, that issue, to me, it almost feels like there's kind of this little tumor in your relationship that needs to be removed. And, you know, it's going to be hard for you to feel like a team until we deal with the issue, or at least resolve that issue to a certain extent. And the way you've been battling each other at it, I mean, it's almost like, you know, if there was a tumor, a surgeon wouldn't use a saw and a hammer to do surgery, would he? Or would she? Yeah. And that's kind of how you two have been approaching this issue. And I want to suggest that we move on to this next exercise called seeking and granting forgiveness, as a way that we might maybe more effectively try and do surgery on this issue. So we've got this exercise. I think you're both, we've turned to it already here. It's called seeking and granting forgiveness. And there's really 6 steps for both the person who's seeking forgiveness and for the person who's granting forgiveness. And we've already talked a little bit about this, and Bill, you were saying, you know, you're very willing at this point to go through this and acknowledge, maybe not that it was categorically wrong for you to have something nice for yourself, but maybe it was the way you went about it that was the most hurtful. So can we dive in on this? And I want to start with you. Step 1 for seeking forgiveness, Bill, is admitting what you did was wrong or hurtful. Could you just look at Jen and talk to her a little bit about that piece with the motorcycle?
I can see that by making the decision that I made without asking you, I understand how that hurt you. And it wasn't my intent to do that. But
I didn't even need you to ask me, though. It wasn't that you needed me to grant you permission necessarily. But I appreciate you saying that.
See how both of them now are looking at it from the other one's vantage point.
Now the next step, Bill, and that was good, is to try and understand or empathize with the pain your partner has felt, okay? Do you know what empathize means? If you were to put yourself in her shoes and look at it and feel that from her standpoint, and that's what we do when we try and empathize with someone. So one great way to do this step is to actually ask her, would you tell me what it felt like for you when this event happened? And then, remember we talked about the active listening. Let her know what you hear her saying when she's done explaining that. So your job will be to kind of keep it in a bite-sized chunk that he can actually get. Okay, so go ahead on step 2, just ask her to tell you about that.
Jen, would you tell me what it felt like when I bought the motorcycle without asking you?
It felt like you didn't care about what I thought, and that we weren't a team anymore. So, no, that's a bite-sized chunk.
Yeah. Tell her what you heard. What did she say?
That my buying the motorcycle without asking you meant that I didn't care what you thought and didn't feel like we were working together as a team.
Now, one of your things, Jen, is your first step on granting forgiveness is to acknowledge the pain or anger that you've felt over this. So this is kind of your chance too to make sure he really gets it. Is there anything you want to add to this and tell Bill about how you felt about that situation?
Well, it was hard for me to go back to work full time, knowing that we kind of needed the money, and so we're both working really hard, and to feel like one person deserves something over another was really hard, and that hurt a lot, and that just, it sort of felt like a turning point in our relationship. There has been a lot of conflict, but straw that broke the camel's back for me, because it wasn't even talked about with me, and
Notice his demeanor.
you didn't take into consideration
He's really taking that in.
that Joelle's in college and needs the money, and that I'm working really hard to make ends meet along with you working really hard, and all those things
There's
were
not
kind
emotion,
of
they're really
left by the
absorbing,
wayside.
understanding.
I know that was a lot.
I'm sorry, I'm
That's all right.
not
No,
very
that's all
brief.
right. That's all right. There's a lot of kind of raw feelings there, and that was very well expressed. And I have to tell you, forgiveness is a process, and so we're going to go through these steps here, but this may be a process that unfolds over time, and so you can revisit this, and you guys can work on this.
I disagree with
And
that.
it may be
but I'll
important
tell
for
in a
you
minute.
at some time, Jen, to say, you know, I still feel like there's a couple that understand. And if you don't understand that, I'm not going to feel very safe about how we're doing things here. So that's okay for you to both realize. You know, the mistake a lot of people make when they're seeking forgiveness is they want it to happen quickly. You need to give her permission to okay. All right? Let's move on to this next step, though. Taking responsibility, making restitution if necessary. Now, in this situation, what do you feel like how have you been taking responsibility, or how can you take responsibility for your actions around this?
I'm trying to work hard.
Mm.
You know, and I know that you don't like all the traveling that I do, but that's all part of me trying to do what I can to get us financially where we want to be.
Mm. Good, good.
I know you work hard.
Hmm. Now the next step, Bill, is number 4, assure your partner you will not do it again. Is that something